Thanks so much for joining us today. It's so good to have you back on. Now, before we get into our episode today, why don't you take a couple of minutes to subscribe to my Substack? We are working on building that email list and we are working on getting newsletter updates sent out. We are so close. It just takes a little more work. So sign up on Substack so that you can get updates from me straight into your inbox whenever breaking news happens, and newsletters that the plan is every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. We'll see how that turns out. But yeah, subscribe to my Substack so that you know what's going on in the world. You can also follow the show at the Ishan S Show. I like to clip episodes and interviews, so if you ever miss an episode, you can always catch up on social media. And you can find me at Real Ishan Shrivastava on Instagram, and you can find me there on TikTok as well. I'm on TikTok now. And you can find me at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social on Blue Sky. Okay, so we are in the middle of a lot of things in this country. So much is going on. Like the crazy stuff is going on all the time, everywhere. Just turn on the news at 7 o'clock tonight and you will see like what I'm talking about. So ideally, in this moment of seriousness, what we call for is a president who can actually meet the moment, who can actually do stuff, who can actually really address the problems that our country faces. Yet we have Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump obviously sometimes is the cause of the chaos. And for many of the things we're going to talk about today, he very much is. But even for the things that are not his fault, I would have expected a president to at least try to solve the problem or issue a statement. But we had Donald Trump in the cabinet room yesterday with his whole cabinet. And they were talking about a lot of issues, but one of the issues that got the very coveted time of discussion in that cabinet meeting was how Donald Trump has been designing and decorating the White House. I'm not even joking. Like, this is something that actually got the time in a meeting. So we were talking about how Donald Trump, in the First Lady's portrait part of the White House, there's a spot in the White House with all the First Lady's portraits. He put this picture up randomly. It's unsettling to look at. I think especially when you're looking at a bunch of First Ladies and then you see that in the middle. Not the most flattering. Or take a look at this, this clock. Donald Trump very proudly claims to have taken it or commandeered it from Marco Rubio at the State Department. That got a couple of laughs in the meeting. There are talks about how there's extensive furnishing and new decor that gives the White House a very Mar-a-Lago feel to it. Right, like that is what we have to really hear this administration talk about. You know, there's a lot of stuff happening, but don't worry. The president is making sure that he is picking the decor and the furnishing in the White House to fit his best needs. So what is going on in the world right now? What is this White House causing or ignoring? There's a few things. So first, you might have heard about the tariffs. The tariffs are once again back on everyone's radar. You might remember a few months ago, I mean, it's almost like I cover the same topics over and over again. And, you know, it gets boring for me on the show sometimes. But nonetheless, we are always on retainer for these tariffs to be put in place. Anyway, you know about those tariffs that Donald Trump put on a few months ago. He put them across the board on all sorts of countries. It was a flat reciprocal tariff rate on every country in the world. We talked about how that's supposed to really jack up our prices, because the way tariffs work is that we tariff or we tax any imported item. And because our consumer base generally does rely on imported goods, the taxes are inherently going to increase the costs of those imported goods. Anyway, Donald Trump, I think, knew that. And so he bluffed, or tried to bluff at least, and lifted those tariffs. And then he put a 90-day pause on those tariffs that he put on the world. And the expectation was that in 90 days, they would get 90 deals. Do you remember that? 90 days, 90 deals? The plan was to get 90 deals in the last 90 days so that these countries that would have otherwise not faced these tariffs would then face tariffs if they did not strike a deal with the White House. Do you want to know how many deals this administration was able to crack? It's not a crazy number. 0. This administration was not able to crack a single deal, except for a framework of a deal. A framework of a deal. And discussions about setting an agenda with some countries. But they have not been able to really conjure up a single substantive deal. And it makes sense. You cannot crack these things out in 90 days. It takes years to plan these things out. It takes years to hash out the details, to make sure everybody's happy, to make sure everything works even. But Donald Trump thought he could get 90 deals in 90 days. Well, he didn't. Today is day 90. And so everybody thought that Donald Trump was going to put the tariffs and then all the countries were going to come. This was supposed to happen in March. You know, March 1st, I believe, was the deadline, was the first tariff day. They were supposed to put all these tariffs on all these countries and American manufacturing would come back and we would be on top and we would be so powerful. Trump didn't. He canceled the tariffs very quickly. Then Donald Trump was supposed to put tariffs on April 1st or April 2nd, which or April 3rd, I think, whatever it was, very beginning of April, he was supposed to put tariffs, and we called that Liberation Day. He called that because America was being liberated from good prices. And then he lifted those. He canceled that, and then he put the 90-day order. Then Donald Trump was, again, supposed to put those tariffs back in today, because this is day 90. And once again, Donald Trump be Donald Trump, he lifted it. And now the new deadline has been extended to August 1st. It's almost like Donald Trump, who once called tariffs the most beautiful word in the dictionary, is afraid of tariffs. And it makes sense. Tariffs raise prices. I just explained how that works. You tax any imported good, the good will cost more. Very simple, Econ 101. And I think Donald Trump knows that. Now, he keeps saying tariff. He keeps selling it to his base, deceiving them, making them think that America is benefiting from whatever this policy is, when in reality, costs are expected to go up. One study said that tariffs would be expected to go up, would expect households to pay about $4,000 more a year. That is one study out there. Right now, with the tariffs that Donald Trump has put, and I'll talk about those in a second, we have an effective tariff rate of about 17.6%, which is the highest since 1934, 91 years ago. And so households are going to be expected to pay about $2,300 more in 2025. Now, the reason I say the effective tariff rate right now is that much is because, yes, tariffs are on pause on most countries, but letters have been sent around and countries have been threatened with tariffs ranging between 20 and 50% to be in effect on August 1st. He also put a 50% tariff on copper, which resulted in copper futures rising, but there was a tariff put on copper. The expectation that this administration has is that with a 20 to 50% threat on tariff rates going to these countries, that all the countries will come running to America begging for a deal. But the reality is, Donald Trump is not sticking with anything he says. This is the third time he has extended a tariff deadline. What's to say he won't do it on August 1st? I think he understands that his own voters, the people that sent him into office to lower costs, the same people are going to experience increases in costs. I mean, people like us will experience those, but even his own supporters will. And he knows that. He really does know that. But he keeps playing this game of chicken. You know, there's this saying going around, because not even Wall Street takes it seriously anymore. They have this saying, taco. Trump always chickens out. And I think we're seeing taco at play again. because the tariffs that were supposed to be put into effect today, the delayed Liberation Day tariffs, should have gone into effect today, but they haven't, because Donald Trump doesn't want to increase your prices. Not because he cares, but because he's afraid that he's going to look bad. The tariffs were always a bad idea from the start. That's always been true. But the fact that he keeps extending this deadline highlights like an intellectual dishonesty, in my opinion. I think it highlights that because he knows that it's bad, but he keeps threatening them and he keeps touting them, knowing that they're not great for the average American. Yet he keeps going everywhere saying that they're great. So that's where the tariffs are. As of the recording of this, he's not announced new tariffs, although before we did go on, I did read that he was talking about more tariffs and more policy to come out today. So we'll probably miss the coverage of that, but I'm sure we'll talk about it in the next episode, or I'll post something on Instagram. Again, follow on social media for that. So Donald Trump is going to raise the price of everyday goods, just everything. But another thing that he's going to increase the price of is energy. That's another one, right? Donald Trump ran on lowering the costs of everyday goods. And one of the ways he said he would do that is by lowering energy costs, which on paper makes sense. You lower the cost of energy, you lower the cost to make stuff. And so because of that, those things become cheaper. But the big ugly bill, the big ugly bill that we talked about, that makes a lot of cuts to clean energy tax credits. And you might think clean energy tax credits, that's a blue state liberal thing. It's not. It actually isn't. And if you saw one of my clips that I posted the other day, there was an analysis done by the Times which showed that the cuts to clean energy tax credits is going to hurt the clean energy job sector and clean energy in general, which has actually become a very large industry in this country. And so in states like North Carolina, Arizona, Nebraska, where clean energy tax credits actually help, energy costs are expected to go up because there are some segments of those states, of those people that rely on clean energy to, in some part, fuel their energy production. Donald Trump's big ugly bill cuts those tax credits and thereby increases the cost of that energy. And when you increase the cost of that energy, applying the same theory, it becomes more expensive to make stuff. And that makes stuff more expensive for you and me to buy at the store. So that's one thing. Another thing that Trump did was with the Inflation Reduction Act. You might remember that we covered that a few years ago. That also had some clean energy tax credits. President Trump signed an executive order that rolled back even more of those tax credits. One of those was buying the electric vehicle tax credit that made it easier to buy an electric car. You know, you can buy an electric car for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that it does do is save you money on gas. And you know, Trump cut that. So not only are we expecting costs of energy to go up in some states, including states that voted for President Trump, we can also expect about 800,000 green jobs to be lost by 2030, about $15.5 billion in canceled investments, and $433 added to the average household electricity bill by 2035. So much for lowering the cost of goods. Tariffs, clean energy, you and me, the price you pay, it's all going to go up. It's all going to go up. And you can pretend that it's not going to happen. I don't think that really helps anyone. Or you can actually admit that this is not good, that it's not good that life is going to become more expensive. And if Trump doesn't, chicken out of the August 1st deadline that he has imposed on countries across the world, then those costs are going to go up. The cost of the goods they send to us will go up. Pharmaceuticals, groceries. We can't grow food in America all year. We have to import them during the winter, many foods, because that's just how it works. You cannot grow stuff in the cold. So that's why we have to import it from countries that can. Food, toys, literally anything. We import a lot of goods. And it's going to be these types of things that makes life harder. I mean, not to mention the big ugly bill, which cuts Medicare coverage to 17 million people, or how 3 million people are going to lose food assistance, or how free lunches are under threat. So much to talk about. So that's one part. Here's another thing. Federal layoffs. You might remember when Elon Musk was in the White House with his reign of terror on the federal government before being removed. I say removed, but he quit on his own terms, like he says. He loved layoffs. He loved firing people out of the federal government. Well, the Supreme Court just ruled there were challenges to that, and mass federal layoffs were initially blocked. Now the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is a big policymaker now on behalf of the Trump administration, Supreme Court has now allowed the White House to proceed with mass federal layoffs, which overrides previous judicial blocks on it. And so these cuts are expected to impact multiple departments, including agriculture, health and human services, the State Department, and Veterans Affairs, ranging, and the estimates range with hundreds of thousands of positions of people being fired. You might be all for cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, but we have seen how this administration carries out layoffs of the federal government. It's haphazard, it's uninformed, and it's reckless. And the only thing it does is hurt the American people. I mean, look, for example, at the VA cuts. The Department of Veterans Affairs had cuts, and those cuts were expected to hurt veterans who wanted to get access to services from the VA. The cuts in the jobs would lower the number of caseworkers, would lower the number of physicians sponsored by the VA. Or let's talk about agriculture. Bird flu. Remember that? Bird flu was a problem, and it still is a slight problem. Well, the administration, when they had this broad authority before they were blocked, they were firing people who were responsible for stopping bird flu, for coming up with ways to mitigate the terrible effects of it. I mean, what's the intelligence in what the decisions they are making? Not a lot. Not a lot. They cut waste, fraud, and abuse, but really they're just cutting out normal people who actually do a lot of stuff for the federal government and in turn help the American people. If they wanted to, if they were serious about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, they would study and they would learn more about the problems and inefficiencies in the federal government, which no doubt exist. But they wouldn't just take a blanket firing pen and fire every single person from their position. It makes no sense. But that's another thing they're doing. Here's another story. This one's a funny one. Not really that funny, but it's funny because it highlights the same problem. So the White House did not seem to know when Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth paused shipments of Patriot and Stinger missiles to Ukraine. What? So the Department of Defense is usually responsible for weapons shipments and deliveries of weapons to Ukraine so that they can fight their invasion against the invasion that they are facing because of Russia, with Russia's reckless and illegal invasion of their territory. We've been helping them fight back. So the Department of Defense is responsible for making sure that the weapons shipments actually get there. So Secretary Pete Hegseth, without informing President Trump or really anyone, paused the shipments of Patriot and Stinger missiles. And apparently President Trump had no idea, and he was caught off guard by this. He said he didn't know who authorized the freeze when reporters asked him, like, do you know who did this? He said, I don't know. Somebody did it. Trump rejected that pause, as a matter of fact, and he reversed the decision and ordered the resuming of shipments, including the Patriot interceptors to Ukraine, asserting that they have to be able to defend themselves. I mean, we have talked about a long time about how Donald Trump has a really weird policy background with Ukraine. No one's going to debate that, but here at least we can say that he was trying to support Ukraine and get them the weapons they needed. That's not the point I want to highlight. The point I want to highlight is that his own administration made this decision without informing him. He was caught off guard. He didn't expect this. He didn't even want it to happen. He reversed the decision and pretends like it doesn't matter. When in reality, that's really problematic. Secretary Pete Hegseth is just making decisions now, and the White House just doesn't know. I mean, what part of that screams reliable or good? So I find that a little alarming. Now, the White House did say that Trump still has full confidence somehow in Hegseth, despite the breakdown in communication, but this is a big thing to be ignoring. Secretary Hegseth just kind of went around the President of the United States and just ordered something. And really, the explanation is that he assumed that this was something that President Trump wanted, but really, I guess it wasn't. And Trump was caught flat-footed. He said he didn't know who authorized the freeze when pressed by reporters. A lot of stuff going on in the world. And there's more stuff that's going on that I chose not to cover here on the show today. But I would encourage you to go research and learn a little bit more, because there's too much that goes on, and this administration really loves to flood us with all sorts of crazy stories. It's called flooding the zone. You should inform yourself. You shouldn't get overwhelmed by so much happening. You should try to learn about everything going on and try to become more informed on things. We can only cover so much here. But that does it for us for today's episode. I know it was a quick episode, but a lot of stories to cover and not a lot amount of time. But thank you so much for joining us today. If you liked my commentary, then please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And why don't you also subscribe to my Substack? You can use the QR code on your screen, or you can go find my Substack and subscribe so that you can get my updates sent straight to your inbox. You can also follow the show on Instagram at The Ishan S Show. And you can follow me on TikTok and on Instagram at Real Ishan Shrivastava. And you can follow me on Blue Sky at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. All right, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you in the next one.